Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, from joining from all over the country and the world where you are. And I'm Professor Birju Shah. Currently, I'm the product lead for the Sensing and Inference group at Uber. And today, I'm going to walk you through what I think are long-lasting skills needed for product management, but also kind of the up-to-date technology and the future skills that you need. Some logistics out of the way. If you're not muted, please mute yourself. I'll go through this lecture probably for a half hour, and then after that, we'll have a half hour for Q&A. So excited to meet you all. And then during Q&A, when you unmute, if you could just say your name and what and where you're located, that would be great for me. It's a little bit about me. So I mentioned that I'm part of the sensor intelligence group here at Uber. I'm leading that group. I've had a wide variety background where I've done consulting, I've done banking, I've worked at M&M Mars and Candy, but I've launched a lot of products. So I worked at large tech companies and launched a lot of mobile and web products that you see here today. Everything from agriculture to online maps to ride sharing that you see, and even kind of food service and food logistics company. So the common theme that I've had in my career has really been always evolving to the next step in technology, but having a core product skill set around big data, understanding consumer needs and wants, and then tailoring a product for those consumer needs and wants. And so you'll see kind of the theme today and the skills that I talk about for product management, and what you need to be a successful product manager in the market today and in the future, really references some of these pain points. So I want to talk about a lot about software today, but feel free in the Q&A to ask me about other product management skills you may need in other industries like medicine, or agriculture. All right, so let's kick this off. So the first half of this presentation really is some of the core fundamental skills you need in product management. And I think these are kind of everlasting skills. So the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is a framework. It's the double diamond framework. In the double diamond framework, there's really two diamonds. In the left diamond, the first diamond is, are we solving the right problem? And the right diamond is, are we building the right solution? So you have an idea, and it's great that you have an idea and you're passionate about it and you're pitching it. Now that you have an idea, you really need to ask yourself, are you solving the right problem with your idea? So in order to do that, you want to diverge your idea and your solution. You want to go back to the problem ideation phase. You want to go ahead and do customer surveys, launch experiments, launch kind of smoke experiments. And then you diverge in terms of, are you solving the right problem? And once you gather all that feedback and you determine the personas and needs and wants of users, you're going to start reconverging back to, are you solving the right problem with your idea? Once you converge back, you're going to start developing mocks, doing more UX research, and get to like a right flow that you can present to users that eventually gets to a point where you end up in between those two diamonds and you really have the right problem that you're going to solve, and you have the mocks to show everybody. Once you get there, you move to the second diamond, the solution diamond. So now that you have the idea that you're going to build, you're solving the right problem, and you have really good mocks and UI to show for it, you're going to work with your technology team, or if you yourself are a technologist, and you're going to start diverging on the different types of solutions that are out here. The solutions could be any new technology, could be just related to the mobile, to the cloud, but you want to assess the lowest hanging fruit way that you can get to market, but still achieve users and achieve revenue. And once you assess all those solutions, you start converging and prioritizing your user stories and sizing those user stories into the right solution to building your product. And so I break this down a little bit more here, which the left diamond is, are we solving the right problem? The right diamond is, are we building the right solution? And so in the first half of the problem definition, it's about discovering. You want to do a lot of research here, and it's customer-centric research. On the right side of the problem diamond, it's all about define. So it's all about a synthesis of all the themes you got from your research, the clustering, the insights, and developing those mocks and concepts. And that'll flow into design, where you're going to get further into, designing and then doing customer research based on that design and working with your technologists to make sure those design reflects the right solution that you're going to present. And then once you're there, you start prioritizing and you prototype, and then you start refining your solution. You build your specs for final implementation. I think this double diamond framework is very applicable across many industries, and it's a great way to level set yourself when you're building a new product, incrementally building a new feature, regardless of if it's a device or a software product. So the other thing I want to talk about is that this framework is a good way to think about, where is a product manager involved and where is kind of your engineering counterpart involved. So in the beginning, a lot of the times the ideation comes from the product management, because they have such a deep understanding. They're the CEO of the problem and the customer. So the product manager always owns the what and the why, which is really the problem use case. And then they're in charge of getting alignment from their engineering counterparts. Then on the solution standpoint, the handoff really goes to technical leads. And then the good product manager will iterate and dive in and roll their sleeves up to be able to dive into the solution piece of this. From there, there's a couple of deliverables that you develop through this framework. There's a thing called a PRD, a product requirements doc. There's a truth doc, and then there's what we call a request for comment or an engineering requirements doc. So in this phase, you're really developing a PRD on the problem, and in this phase, you're developing a PRD on the solution. The truth doc, which I'll show you on the next slide, has a lot of detail that every member of your team, the product manager, the designer, the UX researcher, the engineering person, the salesperson, can go to it to see what this product's going to be and what the go-to-market is going to be. And then the engineering requirements doc is exactly that. It's what are the requirements needed for engineering to launch version 0 and version 1. In these diamonds, you can see the scope is a little bit different. So in the first diamond, in the problem framing, this is a majority of the product manager's scope. A good PM will loop their engineer, data scientists, designers in early on, but you're taking the onus for this. In the problem solving phase, it's kind of equal, right? Because you're iterating on the actual solution. On the usability phase, it's shifting a little bit more to the design resources that are handling a lot of the work for you, but you kind of still have your hands in it. And then on the last side of the phase, the aesthetics and the engineering build, it's more about engineering and design with you taking a little bit of a back seat and working on the test cases, testing, and making sure it's meeting the market fit. So a truth doc has a bunch of things in it, but if we keep with the framing of the double diamond and the actual truth doc and the product requirements doc, in the discover, define, design, and refine phase, you have all these elements in it that really keep everyone honest, and it allows you to build an excellent product and take a little bit of the ambiguity away for your team. So as you're building a business or you're iterating at a company on a new product, you really have something to reference of how to build an excellent product. I can't stress enough that I think a lot of startups focus on the business side and building a business, and they lack a really quality product as their MVP. This is what I call minimum required effort for a product manager or a new startup product person to build this document to realize they're building a better, perfect MVP product and getting their engineers aligned on what to build. So you as a PM, if we use this, and you'll see the breadcrumb at the top right of that double diamond, your basics is you're the CEO of the customer and the CEO of the problem. So in that first half of the problem, you really want to understand the customer journey. And in this example, this is an agriculture example where you really take the grower, the farmer, the different dealers and the partners, and you understand how they all interact, understand the main areas that they cover during the season, and then you develop a problem statement from it that really understands the problem and the value prop for that problem. So this is you being the CEO of the customer. Once you understand that, you're really going to start getting into the design mindset. So a good product manager has a very good base understanding of design and what design frameworks mean to them, but they usually work with designers that actually implement the design. So I want to dive into this a little bit more. And in the 3 levels of design, I want to talk about reflective, behavioral, and visceral design. But good design definitely addresses human cognition and elicits the appropriate emotions that promote a positive experience from your users. So in visceral design, this refers to your initial reaction when you use a product. Just remember the first time you used the search bar, the first time you used the Uber app. What was your initial reaction to be able to use that actual application? Did you find it stimulating? Why was it particularly interesting? What was the aesthetics of it? Do you think it was high value relative to alternatives you had? Did you have any sort of sensory engagement with it? Did you have a good experience with your first driver that you took on the car? Stuff like that. On the behavioral side, it all refers to the usability and functionality of the product. So what are the deal breakers? Does it meet your minimum needs? How did it perform? Was it kind of hacky? Did it lag in terms of time? And what's the ease of use? Could you just click a button, or did it know what you wanted to do? Or do you have to click multiple ways and find your path forward? And there's a reflective side. This refers to your ability to understand the impact on your life after you've used the product. So this is the feeling in its absence. So now that you've used the product and you don't have it, how do you feel when it's not around? You also want to understand the user's ability to attach value to your product. Does it represent an idea that you yourself identify with or wish to? And the desire for ownership. What is your driving your desire to own it? And pretty typical examples here are Snapchat, Facebook, and Instagram, right? And so they launch features that really focus on the reflective side of design. So once you get through kind of this design framework, you're translating design to build. And this is always a little tricky. So a good PM will either do this himself or work with a designer. And now that you have kind of your elements of design and your PRD established, you're going to start drawing, wireframing, and creating information architecture. Drawing is as simple as it sounds. You should have no shame in how you draw out what the product should look like. You could draw it on a napkin, you could do it in PowerPoint, but you shouldn't be scared to use any sort of tool and just treat it like Pictionary to convey your idea. You want to see in the worst form and fashion of you drawing your idea out once you have your product requirements, understanding the personas and the user stories. You want to see if people resonate with kind of these minimum valuable drawings. And if they don't, you want to pivot those drawings. It's a low fidelity way to get feedback. Once you go from there and you start aligning on what people see, you really want to start wireframing. What that means is you want to understand the different boxes of your screens, how they flow together, how they click through to each other, and then it's tied together with your information architect to develop the optimal path forward. In the information architecture, you're going to create a diagram that outlines all the pages and states that you need to account for. So this is your data input and your data output. You're using your wireframe to understand what data is on that wireframe in that specific box on that specific screen, and what action and output is going to be a result of a click or an action from the user. An example of the information wireframe is just something like this. You have a home page, there's a modal that feeds into that, there's a search that feeds into that. This includes features that are here and henceforward. So you could definitely go down and create a big information architecture that really provides the user the information of how the navigation is going to go. It allows you to make your wireframe more active so you can see how things click through, and allows you to align and paint a picture for your engineers of what information is going to be where, as well as your designers. So now that you've gone through your drawing and wireframing, and you're working with customers always in this, because remember, you're the CEO of the customer and the problem, you want to get to prototyping. And prototyping is all about creating a tangible experience so you can validate this with your audience and test it out. So this is higher fidelity artwork. It's usually visual design, usually something in Photoshop or Sketch. And you usually try to get through that flow in a meaningful way of what your end flow is. So you have your user story, you prototype on Sketch, you allow a user asking them a question to say, how would you go about buying a product on Amazon's website? Present them a prototype of a new flow and see how they get to the path of clicking to action. Once you get this at kind of a mass scale, you're able to get some significance and understand what your true design specs are for translating to engineering build. So some of the things with artwork generation, I always try to leave my classes with actual ways that they can implement. So we always demo products in the classes. So don't be afraid to download Sketch or Adobe or the Experience Design. They're very easy to use now. There's a lot of templates out there too to download and start using them to do the higher end artwork generation. Your designers will actually love you for this if you actually take a first attempt at this and you can actually convey what you're thinking about in a better artwork fashion. And the prototyping tools, there's so many. Envision, Marvel, Framer, Proto.io. The designer that we had that kind of co-taught the class with us really showcased all the different tools being pretty similar and why you would use the different tools of different prototyping and user experience interviews. And then you get to your design specs. So once you have prototypes, you really want to translate those design specs into very specific specs that a front-end engineer and a back-end engineer could look like. For front-end engineering, there's actually tools available like Zeppelin where you could take your Envision, translate it, and it gives you the column width, the row width, the type of font, and it really allows the developer to then actually download that spec and actually code to it from a front-end standpoint. So you as a product manager, I think this is where a lot of people fail. They build their idea, they build their product requirements doc, they have really good design, and then they think they could just launch when they build. But they don't think ahead of time of how to test their product to make sure that build is perfect and how to continuously get feedback to evolve their products. So one of the key callouts I call out with the product manager is that you always have to have your thumbprint on how to gain feedback, how to do more usability studies repeatedly even after you launch a product, and how to make sure you're articulating the analytics you need to collect, coding for those analytics, and then collecting and always measuring those analytics to drive whether or not a feature is working or not. So in general feedback, you want to put your prototypes in front of people and observe their reaction. That's really it, right? You walk through your job stories and your user stories, ask people if they feel accomplished by that story and using your solution. All observation based. In usability study, you want to write out tasks that you expect users to overcome while experiencing your product. You want to observe those where they get stuck in those tasks, and you want to use these tools that we talked about that help go through those tasks and use a higher fidelity artwork in this case. And then analytics, you want to make sure that once you build a product, it's instrumented correctly to gather these analytics, and then you're measuring the right dashboards for all the experiments that you're running. All right, so let's talk about some of the future PM skills that you're going to need. So this is kind of the fun part of the presentation for the last 8 minutes here. So in the solution phase of this diamond, there's many ways that you could diverge, and you can think of different solutions of how to build your product. What I'm going to talk about here, which I think is the more interesting part, is some of the new technologies and the new themes that I'm seeing in the market today, either at Uber or at other companies, that really focus on your ability to understand these technologies and where you could really ramp up to add value to companies or your own startup. So besides the basics, some of the skills that I think people should ramp up on now is definitely data science, the new age architecture that exists, machine learning, and operations, which I'll talk about here, artificial intelligence, and computer vision. So let's go ahead and dive deep into each one of these. So for data science, it's really about visualizing, experimenting, understanding the statistical way to gain significance, and unlocking value through your data to improve your product. What I mean by this is a lot of times there's no data science when you launch your product the first time. But as you launch it and you have users using it, you want to understand all the inputs that flow into the user using your product. Understand the actual core metric or the key performance indicator, the KPI, that you're measuring that shows success for that feature. And then you want to dive into that detail. You want to understand why that feature matters or it doesn't matter. The other thing people are using data science for are really interesting use cases. Once you have a plethora of big data, you could do things that are tangential to your company, but actually help your ecosystem. In this example with Uber, there's a lot of data that we have that enables the core ride sharing, but there's also data that allows us to visualize access to healthy food options in Cincinnati. So being able to dive into that big data, overlay Cincinnati's data, overlay our restaurant data, we could actually show an interesting map that is useful for the citizens of Cincinnati. There's a lot of use cases like this in data science, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions in this when we get to that FAQ. New age architecture. So I didn't detail anything out here because I wanted to talk to this and dive into the FAQ. But a lot of it ends up being the distinguishing of how do you do edge computing on the mobile client side versus cloud computing. And in architecture, you want to understand, depending on what stage you're at or product, building microservices, allowing teams that you have to innovate very fast in those microservices, understanding when you need a dense cloud with a lot of services calling that cloud, or when you need potentially just fast reaction client-side computing. So to understand the mobile phone architecture, understand what the cloud can do with you in terms of deep learning and batch type of jobs, and understanding when to leverage that depends on your product, when you launch your product, and how you want to scale your product. And something I'm happy to dive deep into in that FAQ. All right, so machine learning. Uber launched this machine learning platform called Michelangelo, and there's a lot of companies that are launching the machine learning platforms. I recommend you go to some of the big company developer blogs, look up their machine learning platforms, and really understand it, right? And machine learning, it really comes back to the product angle. You want to develop your user scenarios based on your persona, and then you really want to dive deep in how a user uses your product to achieve an action. You want to understand their journey and their experience to achieve that action. And then what you want to do is look for opportunities for automation. What that means is that during the journey that the customer faces to achieve an action, they're obtaining a bunch of training data that you're using, that you're able to clean, ingest, correlate, and able to say, this is something that I can automate. And I'm going to feed my system with this training data. And I'm slowly going to take kind of the manual way out of it and start having automation occur because of this. So machine learning is one of the things that I would really like people to ramp up on. This is a way that you evolve any product that you have pretty much from any industry, and it's really leveraging big data and the scalability of platforms. Operations. So why I call this out is that I think product managers always focus on tech in the software world and even in the other medical worlds and other worlds. But operations is a key thing. We're in a global, flattened environment where knowledge is shared everywhere. But each city, each country, each geo area underneath that city is pretty unique. So you always need to have your thumbprint on each of these cities and have unique partners or unique operators understand the differentiators for that specific city or market. And this allows you to realize if your product should be more configurable, what features should be more configurable, and what allows you to gain market share in these cities because your product is more configurable based on the consumer needs and demands in that market. And understanding how to execute that is really understanding operations and developing a strong understanding of how local markets work. So in the new world of these scalable platforms, you really need key partners to understand the operational elements of your product. AI. So AI is the hardest part of this, right? So artificial intelligence really involves these deep learning skill sets that evolve machine learning into some way that automates a big system dynamics ecosystem into an action. So we have a lot of AI work going on in computer vision, where there's video streams or camera pictures that are taking pictures of elements and then helping understand how that is a road sign or there's traffic in a certain area. And you have artificial intelligence with self-driving cars or even in the medical world to detect disease. And all of it's the same base. It's all about collecting the data, cleaning the data, correlating the data, developing training scenarios, and then developing these deep ecosystem, system dynamic algorithms that allow data to be taken in and understand how your system is going to be impacted by this data. So an example is a robot walking. With the robot walking, there's a lot of elements in the system. Are they on a sidewalk? Is the sidewalk elevated? Is there obstruction? How do you detect the obstruction? Are they in a heavy traffic area? Are they at a red light, a stop signal? There's all these elements of when a robot should be walking or not be walking. And so this is what I mean about machine learning taking each individual attribute and doing learning on that, but that being evolved in a bigger ecosystem that allows you to do deep learning and evolution of that. So the last one is computer vision and NLP, and these are more tactical. A lot of projects right now are focused on using the camera for computer vision or LiDAR radar technology. And they're a little bit more targeted in terms of what they're solving and what use cases, but like Alexa with natural language processor, like the Amazon camera that takes pictures and recommends clothing from your closet, there's really interesting ways now to take image and take voice and take other sensors from the phone and other devices and be able to actually solve your use cases and your problems with it. So getting familiar with all the use cases out there, really studying self-driving cars as one of the key ways that people are using this technology or Alexa is a great way to dive forward to understand the solution architecture that they use and how you could use that solution for your product. All right. And then the last thing I'll say is about execution. So this is more jumping back to the basics. So now that you've done all your work in identifying the needs and wants of your users, understanding the design work, understanding the design that you're going to implement, really working with your engineers on what's the innovative architecture or engineering solution that you're going to approach, you got to get down to the details. And the details here are pretty simple Scrum details. What are your user activities? What are your user tasks? And what are your user stories? What this allows you to do is have a hierarchy of organizing your work into Scrum chunks every 2 weeks, where you could start building out these different tasks into different releases, and then you could demo those features, and you could start building your whole solution. So this is a great simple story map example of being able to build an email calendar and contact system. So the first thing is organizing email, that key activity, and then within there's features of search email and file emails, and there's user activities here for release one, search by keyword, move emails, create subfolders, and so on. And so this is a lot of the whole jobs to be done architecture that allows you to bucket releases, allows you to figure out the capacity of engineers that you have and when they could execute and how they could execute and how fast they could execute. So in the last bit, an engineer's ability to create vision, to document that vision and understand the customer and the problem, and then to execute and create these job boards, it's also understanding what are the motivations that you have working with engineers. So you have to have a pure respect and a foundation of truth with your engineers, but you also have to understand what motivates them. There's a ton of things that motivate them, from patents, publication, career growth, learning, scale of impact, a lot of cool buzzwords. But the main thing really solves three things. It's build useful things, solve meaningful problems, and profit. And I want you as a PM always to keep these in account when you're executing, and then you will be successful in whatever you execute. Okay. So my